discussion today, I have actually enlisted a list of key steps that we will review before we look at the code pipeline. One of the key steps, the first one that I would certainly encourage everyone viewing this video is to basically visit this particular URL that talks about this 4-stage code pipeline. So let's quickly take a look at it. So this is the original tutorial that AWS has created, and it talks about creating the 4-stage DevOps pipeline. And this particular tutorial basically it allows you to develop this pipeline using either Linux or Windows. And for this demo, what we are going to use is that we are going to use the Windows platform. This particular tutorial is pretty good, is pretty exhaustive, very detailed, and I would certainly encourage everyone to kind of at least briefly review the tutorial before you go further ahead with the video, because that would certainly help you a lot in understanding why things are being done the way they are being done. So let's go back to our key steps. And the next key step that I would certainly want to highlight is basically forking the original AWS GitHub repo under your own GitHub personal account. So this way you have the freedom to make any changes whatsoever you want to make, do commits, etc., and then basically leverage that repo for your own personal learning. For this particular tutorial, again, we have created an EC2 instance basically to build and deploy this application in dev and beta environment. And on this particular EC2 instance, we have installed and configured Jenkins. We have installed and configured IIS. We have installed Ruby. And the version of Ruby that we are using for this particular tutorial is version 2.2.2, which is a 64-bit version. And we have also installed CodeDeploy on our EC2 instance. Now, after you installed Ruby, one of the things that you can certainly do is to modify the path environment variable to include the installation directory for rake. Now, this is an optional thing. If you want to do, you could potentially do that. If you use rake on regular basis and you feel that it certainly makes sense for you to modify your path environment variable, feel free to do that. But if not, in that case, you will just be required to use the absolute path to rake.bat. The other thing that we have done as a part of this tutorial is that we have created 2 Jenkins projects. The first project is basically to build the application, and the second project is to test the application. And both these Jenkins projects that we have created will be polling our AWS code pipeline on periodic basis. Now, the original tutorial is only for 4 stages. But for this demo, we have extended that particular tutorial to add 2 additional stages for manual pre-approval and deployment into production environment. And for that, we have created another EC2 instance. And on that EC2 instance, we have installed and configured IIS, and we have installed CodeDeploy. So let's now go ahead and take a look at our code pipeline. So this is our code pipeline, and the name of our code pipeline is Jenkins demo pipeline. And let's review all the stages of this code pipeline. The first stage, as you see over here, is the source stage, and we are using GitHub as our source code repository. The next stage is the build stage, and wherein we will be building our Ruby application, and we are basically using Jenkins to build our application. The next stage after building the application is to deploy the application, and we will be deploying this application on our dev EC2 instance using CodeDeploy. Once that application is deployed in the dev environment, we will be executing certain tests on this particular application, and we will be executing these tests again using Jenkins. And on and above that, we have added two additional stages to this particular pipeline, which is the broad pre-approval stage, which is providing the manual approval to go ahead and perform deployment in the production environment, and finally deploying our application to the production environment using code deploy. Now let's look at all the individual components of this particular pipeline. So let's start first with GitHub. So I have my GitHub repo over here, which has this particular project forked from AWS. As you see over here, this is my personal GitHub repo. Okay, and this particular project, which is AWS CodePipeline Jenkins, AWS Code Deploy Windows, this has been forked from AWS Labs originally. Okay, now let's review the source code real quick over here. I would want to highlight a couple of key things as a part of this particular repo. The first thing that I want to highlight to you is the source folder over here. This particular source folder has a single file, which is index.html.haml file. And if you click on this file, it is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You will see it has a CSS on the top, it has a body, and the body basically has nothing much but congratulations, and it talks about the fact that you've completed the second tutorial for AWS Code Pipeline successfully. And the CSS basically just talks about the background color of the font and a couple of headings that are there on this page. And we will actually, when we execute the pipeline, we will come back to this particular file and we will be making certain key subtle changes to this, like changing the font or changing the background color, and then eventually deploying the application. After the source folder, the next folder that I want to highlight to you is the test folder. Now if you click on the test folder, you will see that there's a single test file, a sample test file as a part of this folder. And if you go ahead and take a look at it, you will see that this particular test file is basically looking for a specific IP address. It's looking for a specific port, and on that IP address at that very specific port, it is looking for index.html. Now this IP address is the IP address of your dev environment, and the port at which your application has been installed. Now by default it will take port 80, and we will be using port 80 for our discussion today, but that's essentially what it is looking for. It is looking for index.html under c:\inet www root on your dev EC2 instance. The next thing that I would certainly want to highlight to you over here is the fact that we are basically looking for an assertion on the page, and the assertion on the page is basically looking for a specific keyword, that is congratulations. So after you load the page, we will be executing this test to find the keyword congratulations. The next thing that I want to highlight to you over here is the rig file. The rig file over here, as you see, it has a couple of key tasks, and the most important task over here is the task to compile. Now basically what this is doing is that it is looking for .html, .haml files under the src or the source folder, and basically it is going to compile these files and basically render them as HTML. The other key task that this particular rig file does is the last task that you see over here. That is basically creating a test task for our sample test file that we just saw some time back. The other file that you want to take a look at is the .yaml file, And what this file does is that it basically copies the index.html under the destination folder of c:\init pub www root. So I believe we've looked at all the code files of this particular code base. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next stage of this pipeline. Well, before we go there, I want to show you something else as well. So what I have done for this particular demo is that I have actually, you know, cloned this entire repository, the Git repository that we just saw on my local machine. And I will be making changes to this particular Git repository on my local machine and then have them committed over here locally and then finally have it pushed out to our GitHub repo that we just saw. Okay, so so now we can go to the next stage of the pipeline, which is the build stage. And as you see, we are using Jenkins over here to build our project. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Jenkins project. So for this particular demo, we have, as we saw in the key steps, we have created two projects. First is to build the application, and the second is basically to test the application. So the demo Jenkins project over here is a project that we will be using to build the application. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so this is our Jenkins demo project. And one of the key things that you want to ensure over here is that you want to check this concurrent builds, execute them if necessary, because just in case if there are multiple check-ins or something, you want to ensure that those builds are executed concurrently. For our source code over here, as you see under source code management, we are using AWS CodePipeline, and the region is US East. And for this particular source code management type, you need to provide your AWS access key. This is the access key of your AWS user, and that very specific user's secret key. So I have actually provided my access key and my secret key over here. And before we want to execute, we want to execute this project and build our application, we want to clear the workspace. Now the category of this specific task is to build. So that's why we have, as you see over here, we have selected build. The provider name we have given over here is demo Jenkins provider, and the version is 1. Now you want to certainly make a note of this Jenkins provider name that you have given over here, because this is the very same provider name that we will be using in our pipeline as well. So you can possibly copy this and keep it aside, probably in Notepad or somewhere, so that you don't forget it. Because this is going to be the bridging point between your code pipeline and your Jenkins project over here. So what we will be doing is that this particular Jenkins project that we will create, we will be polling our SCM, which is our code pipeline, on periodic basis. And for this particular demo, just to ensure that the demo does not take very long, we are polling our code pipeline after every 2 minutes to see if there are any changes. So this is basically a Ruby project, and as I had mentioned, if you remember in the key steps, that either you can set the path variable where your rake.bat has been installed, and if you use it frequently, you can certainly do that. But if you are just kind of doing this for learning purposes, or just for a demo purpose or something like that, then in that case feel free to just use the absolute path. That will also work equally well. So over here in our build stage, what we are doing is that we are giving the path to a rig.bat, and this particular bash file will be executed to build this application. And yep, that completes all the key configurations for our build project in Jenkins. So let's look at the other project that we have over here. The other project that we have created in Jenkins is our project to test this application after our application is deployed, and that is the demo Jenkins test project. Now this project is very similar to a build project with a couple of key differences. First is obviously the name of the project, and as you see over here, I've provided the access key, the secret key. But again, since this project will be used for testing purposes, we have selected the category as test, and again we are using the same demo Jenkins provider over here, and the version is 1. And again, just like how we were polling a code pipeline from our build project, similarly we will be polling our code pipeline from here, from our test project, on periodic basis as well. And as you see that over here, we are basically polling our pipeline after every 2 minutes. Now as part of the build command over here, as you see, what we are doing is that we are basically trying to execute a couple of tests. Now if you remember, and if you want, you can at this point go back and rewind it, when we were going through all the source and the test file source code. It was looking for 3 parameters. First one was IP address, the second one was the port, and anyways the third parameter was hard coded over there, which was index.html. Now this is the place where we will be calling rig.bat again to basically execute the test in the test folder. And essentially what we are doing is we are passing 2 variables, which is, remember, the IP address and the port. And in this case we are passing the IP address of our dev instance and the port at which our application is available, and that is essentially nothing else but port 80. And I believe this completes all our configurations for our test project in Jenkins as well. So now let's go back over here. So we saw the Jenkins project for our build, we saw the Jenkins project for our test, and the other case stage between these two is the code deploy stage, wherein we are deploying our application on our EC2 instance. And we'll look at our EC2 instance and its configurations shortly. And the final 2 stages over here is the manual approval, and again deploying on our prod EC2 instance using prod code deploy. So now let's go ahead and take a look at our EC2 instances. Now for this particular demo, we are using 2 specific EC2 instances. The first instance acts as our dev environment, and the second instance acts as our prod environment. Now let's look at the configurations of these EC2 instances. As you see over here, this is basically created from Windows Server 2012 R2. That is the underlying AMI that we are using, and it has its own security group, and it has a couple of inbound rules. And as you see, we have opened up port 80 because our application will be deployed over there. Port 8080 is also open on this particular environment, and that's because our Jenkins will be also deployed on this particular box. Remember, this is our dev build and deploy box. So hence we have opened up port 8080, and also Since we will be performing installations, etc. on this box, we have temporarily opened up port 3389, which is the port to RDP to that particular EC2 instance. And on and about that, another thing that I would certainly want to highlight to you over here is the role that is associated with this EC2 instance. So let's quickly go ahead and look at this role. The name of our IAM role over here is Jenkins Access. Now, as you see, with this particular role, we have basically attached three policies. One is the Amazon EC2 full access, because we'll be deploying on EC2. We have also associated Amazon Code Deploy full access. But as you see, we have another custom action access policy associated with this particular role, and that is because we will be integrating with Jenkins, and we'll be executing a couple of Jenkins projects. And to perform any of these custom actions, this AWS CodePipeline custom action access code policy needs to be associated. So that basically allows our role to access, to perform certain custom access, like accessing Jenkins projects, etc. So let's go back, and there we are over here. So that was our Jenkins demo project, which is nothing else but our dev and build environment. Now let's look at our Jenkins demo prod. Now our prod environment is very similar to our dev environment. It is again a Windows Server 2012 machine, and again you will see over here we have opened up port 80 and port 3389. 80 because the application will be deployed at port 80, and temporarily we have opened port 3389 so that we can RDP on this box. Now in real life, probably, let's say if you were to do this deployment in your own production environment, you want to be a little careful before you have 3389 open, or you want to just open it up on conditional basis. Now as you see, we are not opening up port 8080 over here because our Jenkins server is installed on our dev environment, and our dev environment has port 8080 opened over there. But we will not be performing the Jenkins installation on a prod environment, hence we have not opened up the port over here. Again, you see over here I'm using the same IAM role for my production environment as well, which is the Jenkins access role. And if you want, you can essentially use a separate IAM role for your production environment or production EC2 instance. But for this demo, I am basically using the same IAM role for both dev and prod environments. Now let's look at the other. We looked at EC2, we looked at CodePipeline, and we looked at the role for our EC2 instance. So the next thing we certainly want to look at is Code Deploy and our application under Code Deploy. So for this particular demo, I have created this application called as Jenkins demo, as you see. And under this Jenkins demo application, we have created two deployment groups. Now one is for dev and the other one is for prod. Let's look at both of these deployment groups. So I'm going to get it in an edit phase so that we can look at all the configurations. Now as you see, the name of this deployment group is Jenkins demo. This is an in-place deployment because we will be performing the deployment on our EC2 instances. For this particular deployment, we will be doing our physical deployment on EC2 instances which have the key value name equal to Jenkins demo associated to them. And as you see, there's a single EC2 instance which has its key as name and its value as Jenkins demo. And currently this instance is running. The deployment configuration that we will be using is one at a time, and the service role that we are using for this particular deployment is dev deploy role. Now again, I'm using this specific role for both dev and prod. When we go to prod, you will see that I will be using the same specific role, but again, you can have separate roles for dev and your prod environments. So let's go ahead and now look at the prod environment as well. Now our prod environment is very similar to our dev environment, except for some key subtle differences. As you see over here, the name has changed and it is Jenkins demo prod. It is again an in-place deployment, but the EC2 instance on which we will be performing this deployment will be the one with the key value name equal to Jenkins demo prod. And as you see, there's a single EC2 instance which has this particular key value associated to it, and this instance is currently running. Again, the deployment configuration over here is one at a time, and the service role, as I mentioned earlier, we are using the same service role as dev, and the name of the service role is dev deploy role. Now let's go ahead and look at our privileges for our dev deploy role. Just like how we did for our instance role, we will look at the privileges of our dev deploy role, which is the role that we are using to deploy our application. So this is the dev deploy role. Now these are the three key policies that we have associated: EC2 full access, Amazon S3, and code deploy full access. Now I am basically using this for our both dev and production deployments, and I'm also using this very same role to also deploy a couple of other applications, and hence I have Amazon S3 also associated with this particular role. But essentially, if let's say you're only planning to perform this demo, then you don't need to have S3 associated with this role. EC2 and code deploy should just do the trick. Okay, so so we looked at EC2 instances, we looked at code deploy, we looked at our code pipeline, and we looked at the various roles that we will be using for our deployment. So let's go back now to our code pipeline. Okay, so I think the next thing that we should do now is basically go ahead and execute this pipeline. So as we had discussed earlier, I have cloned the repo on my local box over here, and we will be making changes to our source file over here and then checking that in and executing the pipeline. So I had actually executed the pipeline earlier once, and hence this application is actually deployed. So let's look at that deployed application. So this is our index.html. As you see, this is my dev EC2 instance, and as you see, this application is already installed over here. It shows congratulations and a couple of other statements at the bottom. And currently the font color is white and the background color is red. Okay, and similarly we also have this deployed on our production EC2 instance as well. So let's quickly just RDP into our production EC2 instance, and also understand if we have it deployed over there. So let's connect. So this is the public DNS. So I'm just going to go to the public there it is. So this is our production URL, which basically showcases our application deployed successfully. Okay, so now let's go ahead and make a change. So I'm going to open up this index.html.haml file in Notepad++ over here, and as you see that the current background of our application on both dev and production environment is red. So what we will do is that we will change this particular background from red to some other color. So let's see if we can change this to, let's say, green. So first, before I check in this change, I want to ensure that this is I believe this should be green if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I think this is okay. Save this, and I think I have git bash open. So I'm basically using git bash on this particular folder on my local machine. So what I'm going to do is the change that we have made to our index.html over html.haml file over here, since we've changed the background color, I will go ahead and add these changes to our local repo first, and then go ahead and have those changes committed, and then finally have those changes pushed into our GitHub. So let's do that. Add, and I'm just going to add all changes, and then I'm going to provide commit this. Okay, so file is committed, and now I am going to push these changes to my GitHub repo, the origin, and push these. So as you see, these changes has been pushed into my GitHub repo, and the new commit ID is something starting with CEF8A. So let's quickly go ahead and take a look at our GitHub repo over here, and let's look at the latest commit that we have. As you see, the change that we made, change background color, has been committed over here, and this is our new commit ID 6EF8A. So since our changes have now been checked in over here, our pipeline should be triggered. So let's go ahead and look at it. As you see, our pipeline is now in progress, and it has been triggered by the change that we just committed. So now it is basically getting the latest source code from GitHub at this point of time. So shortly the stage should be completed, and then eventually our source code should be built. So let's just wait for a couple of minutes. So as you see, our source was fetched successfully, and you see over here, you actually see the change commit ID over here 6EF8A, and if you actually click on this, it will take you to GitHub, and it will actually show you the changes that you have made. The change over here is a change in the background color, as you see. Okay. So now our build stage is in progress, and basically Jenkins is building this application, and we can actually go to Jenkins and take a look at it. So if we go to Jenkins, and this is our demo Jenkins project, the project that we are using for building our application, and if we click on it, you will see that there was a build that was executed at 5:34 p.m. Now this time that you see over here is the time on my EC2 instance. So let's go to our EC2 instance in a dev environment. So this is my EC2 instance on my dev environment, and as you see, the time over here is 5:35, and I have Jenkins open here as well. So let's go and look at our demo Jenkins project. As you see, this was just triggered a minute back, and let's go ahead and look at the log. And as you see, this particular build was started by an SCM change, which is correct, and it actually brought all the source code, it built it successfully, and then finally, after the source code was built successfully, it was compressed and uploaded back again. So let's go back and to our pipeline now. So as you see over here, now our source code was built successfully, and if you click on this, it will actually take you to the Jenkins directory, as you see over here, that we just saw some time back. Okay, so let's wait for our deployment to complete. As you see, it has succeeded, and if you click on the details link over here, it will show you if the deployment was done successfully or not. As you see, our deployment was done successfully, and it was just recently deployed on our dev EC2 instance. So let's go ahead and see if our application was deployed successfully over here or not. Now this is the local file which is seen at inet c:/inet pub root index.html, and this is the old deployment which has the background color as red. Remember, we changed our background color, so let's see if our background color of our application has changed or not. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page, and as you see, our background color has changed from red to green. Hence, our application was deployed successfully. Now, this is basically looking at this particular index.html locally on this machine. Now, we can also look at the very same index.html that is deployed on our EC2 instance over the web or over the internet, just like how we had looked at our production application. So if I pick up this particular public DNS of our dev EC2 instance over here, and I copy it here, then our dev application will be visible over here over the web. Let's go ahead back to our code pipeline, and as you see, our test stage also executed successfully, and we can actually go ahead and take a look at those details. It takes a while basically to load this if we go directly from there for some reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Jenkins directly over from here. I don't know why it takes some time, but as you see, it's still loading. So let's go ahead and look at the Jenkins demo test project, and as you see, this test project was just executed at 5:37. Again, this is the time on my EC2 instance, and let's go ahead and look at the log again. Our job was completed successfully. As you see, it was executed, and our test was done successfully. Okay, now let's go back to our code pipeline. So as you see over here, the original code pipeline, that is the original tutorial, the 4-stage tutorial, we have executed that successfully right from stores, right from the source stage to the build stage, as well as deploying in our dev environment and then performing a test against our application deployed in our dev environment. Now, finally, we are going to execute the 2 additional stages that we have added to this particular code pipeline. That is basically providing a manual approval and then finally deploying this application in the production environment. So let's provide an approval over here. And we have provided an approval, and then shortly it should trigger our deployment in the production environment. So as you see, this is our production URL, and I'm going to refresh it real quick. It has currently this our application with the red background, and after our application is deployed in a production environment, this will change from red to green. So let's just wait for our code pipeline to execute, and it should just take a couple of minutes before our application is deployed successfully. As you see, right now our pre-approval stage is in progress, and then our pre-deployment stage should be in progress shortly. So let's just wait. Now, as you see, our pre-deployment stage is in progress, and it is currently deploying our application. So it should just take a couple of minutes. It's not a very big application, so hopefully in a minute or so it should be deployed. Typically, when you see the details link pop up, essentially that shows that the deployment process has been completed. Whether it is successful or whether it's a failure, the deployment process has been completed. So as you see, this is still in progress, but we have the details link pop over here. So we are going to click on this details link, and it is going to tell us the status of our deployment. And as you see, our deployment has succeeded and our application has been successfully deployed to our production environment. So let's go back to our production URL over here, and as you see, we have the old application which has the red color background, and if I refresh this, it will change the background color from red to green. So as you see, our background color has changed to green, and that essentially tells us that our application has been deployed successfully. So, so basically what we just saw right now was a successful execution of the entire code pipeline from source all the way to our production deployment. Now, since you have seen this code pipeline in action, it now makes sense to go ahead and take a look at the configuration details of this particular pipeline. So let's do that. So I put the pipeline in an edit mode so that we can look at the configuration details of each stage of our pipeline. So the first stage over here is the source stage, and let's look at the configuration details of this particular stage. As you see, the action category over here is source, and the source provider that we are using is GitHub. And you can basically connect to GitHub. Like if I click over here, connect to GitHub, it will basically, just ask me to give the name of the repository. This is the repository that I'm using, AWS CodePipeline Jenkins, AWS Code Deploy _Windows, and the branch, typically the branch by default will be master in this case. Now, one of the key things that you want to ensure is the name of the output artifact. Again, keep in mind and keep this name copied somewhere aside on a notepad, just like you had kept your Jenkins provider name aside copied on a notepad, because you will be using this particular name in the in the subsequent stages of our code pipeline. Now here it is the output artifact, but this very same output artifact will become the input artifact of our future stages. I'm going to cancel this, and then let's look at the next stage, which is the build stage. And over here the action category as expected is built, and here basically as you see the name over here, demo Jenkins provider. Now this is the same provider name that we had given in our Jenkins build and test projects. So as I said, this kind of acts as a bridging between our code pipeline and our Jenkins project. Now how to add this particular demo Jenkins provider? As you see over here, there's an option over here, it's called as add Jenkins, and if you click over here, then you can provide your Jenkins provider name, your server URL, and your project name. Okay, I'm going to cancel this temporarily and go back. So again, we are using the build provider over here as demo Jenkins provider, and our project name over here is demo Jenkins. The input artifact as over here will be my app, and this is the output artifact of our source stage. Again, over here for this stage we have an output artifact, which is nothing but our compiled, our built application, and we will have to provide an output artifact name over here, and the name of the output artifact that we have given over here is my app build. So which essentially showcases you that this is the built version of your application. Let's look at the next stage over here, which is the code deploy stage, wherein we are deploying our application to our dev environment. So as you see over here, the action category is deploy, and the deployment provider is AWS Code Deploy. The name of our application again over here is Jenkins demo, and if you remember, that was the name of the application that we created under code deploy. And for this particular application we created two deployment groups, one for dev, one for prod. The name for our dev deployment group is Jenkins demo, and along with that we have another deployment group which is Jenkins demo prod that we will use in our future stages when we do the deployment in prod. But since this is the since this is a dev deployment, we are using the deployment group as Jenkins demo. And again, the input artifact over here is the output artifact of our previous stage, which is my app build. The next stage over here is the test stage, and as you see over here, the action category is test. The action name is Jenkins test, and the provider again over here is demo Jenkins provider. Remember, we are executing these tests using Jenkins, and we are using the same provider and the same version. And the name of the Jenkins project over here is demo Jenkins test. And there are no input or output artifacts for this particular stage. Prod approval, as you see over here. Okay, there you go. Okay, so this is the action category over here is approval, and the approval type is manual. I don't think there are any other configurations. No. Okay, and finally we have our prod deployment. Now again over here the action category is deploy, and our action name is prod deploy. Again we are using our deployment provider over here as AWS Code Deploy. The application that we will be deploying is Jenkins demo, but the deployment group is going to be Jenkins demo prod, because this is our prod deployment. And the input artifact over here is going to be my app build, because that is the application that we want to deploy on our production environment. So this kind of completes the review of our pipeline configuration end to end, right from our source stage all the way into our production environment. I hope that this demo was helpful to you. So if you have any questions or concerns, please post comments on our YouTube link, or you can even use a Slack channel to post your questions or concerns, and we will try our best to have your questions answered as soon as possible. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a nice day ahead. Thank you.